Two concepts we're going to cover in this video. One is the Marshall Plan that we're going to start with. We'll also hit the Truman Doctrine a bit later. But let's look first at the Marshall Plan. It is the plan the United States had for rebuilding Europe after World War II. We don't often learn from history, but one of the things I love about the post-war period is you can see the world learning from the mistakes they made at the end of World War I and trying to correct those at the end of World War II. One of the things, if you'll remember, that had happened at the end of World War I is that the blame had all kind of gone on Germany, and Germany was given that $33 billion price tag for the war. And so this instead, George C. Marshall is an American official, is going to give a speech at Harvard in 1947. He's the Secretary of State at this point, and he says, look, we don't need to penalize the countries of Europe. We need to help these countries rebuild. The United States needs to put its money where its mouth is, make an investment in these countries in order to build them up. So that way we don't have to worry about somebody like Hitler coming back into power. These countries are going to be strong enough to stand up against those types of forces. And so he asked for an investment. Between 1947 and 1952, we were going to send $13 billion in aid to the countries of Europe to help them do just that. Think about it. Europe has been at war for 7 years. Roads, factories, airports, all kinds of things are destroyed. This money was to help build that infrastructure back up. Now, it's a good investment. We go and we put this money in, but we are opening up markets to goods from the United States. We've got trading partners, countries that trade with each other, don't have conflicts usually with each other, or conflicts that end up in war. And so you're building economic and social ties between those different countries. The objectives of the Marshall Plan, right? Want to increase productivity. Let's get people to work. Let's have them doing something. Promote trade between countries. Work on positive political cultures, which for us meant giving these people an alternative to communism, right? We want to build these countries up so they're allies of the United States. And then, like I said, want to rebuild their infrastructure. This is a great success. It's one of those rare government programs where you look and really nobody says this was a bad idea. It does what it's supposed to do. It's going to strengthen Western Europe, and I've got a map there for you of Western Europe. Eventually, those countries will bond together in what's called NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, or North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I'm sorry, that basically was a defensive alliance against the Soviet Union. Basically said, hey, if you join this and the Soviet Union attacks, they've got to mess with everybody. Now, they call it North Atlantic because we want Europe in there, but we want an excuse to join too. And so it's kind of a stopgap to the Soviet Union. Hey, you don't mess with any of these countries because then you're going to be messing with us. And so, like I said, huge success. The one country that doesn't take money, the Soviet Union, even though they would have had that available to them. The other thing that you're going to see that comes out of this post-war period, at least government doctrine-wise, is the Truman Doctrine. It comes from a speech that Harry Truman gives to Congress. Doctrine is just basically kind of a way a president thinks things ought to be run, right? You may remember the Monroe Doctrine, where James Monroe said that the Western Hemisphere was closed to European colonization, right? That's another famous doctrine from American history. But the Truman Doctrine, basically, he's asking Congress to extend aid to Turkey and to Greece. So both kind of Mediterranean countries there. Britain, after World War II, had to reduce the aid it was sending out into the world. Obviously, it had its own problems during World War II. And so Truman is asking the United States to step in. He wants to give aid to Turkey and Greece because he's afraid if those countries start to lose the aid they were getting from Britain, the communism will start to look really, really good. And basically, this whole post-war period is we're trying to get people to join Team Democracy or Team Capitalism. And The Soviets were trying to get people to join Team Communism. It's kind of like those Twilight books, if you remember those, where it was like Team Vampire Guy and Team Wolf Boy, right? People like different ones. We want people on our team because the more people we can get on our team, the stronger that stance could be. We didn't have T-shirts or anything. Probably should have. If I'd been president back then, that would have been the first thing a country got was a bunch of T-shirts, Team Democracy, that they could wear, and so they could proudly show that they were unified. But it's probably why I wasn't president. But that's so Harry Truman's asking. Basically, he's saying we want to support free people who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or outside pressures. He says two things. We're going to support democracy everywhere in the world. If a country's a democracy and they need help, we've got their back. And we're going to contain communism. We're not going to try and stamp it out, but we're going to try and stop the spread. So, right, if you put something in a container, you're putting it in there to hold it. That was the policy. We're going to contain communism. We're not going to let it spread anymore. So a lot of United States policy from here, this is going to get us into the Korean War. It's going to get us into the Vietnam War. But there are also going to be some good things that come out of this too. This is going to be our Cold War policy. Support democracy wherever it is. Stop the spread of communism wherever it's trying to spread. Like I said, it's going to get us into two wars. There's a video that's coming up talking about the Korean War, and then Vietnam is going to set up the same way when we look at that from the mid-1960s. But a hugely influential policy for this post-war period and beyond, the Truman Doctrine.